Hulk's a fun character. My wife has said that she likes Hulk because he's a man of few words. He just gets angry, gets big, and then he starts smashing, right? But you know, Hulk is also a great symbol for an emotion that we all experience, which is anger. How many of you feel like that anger inside of you is like that green monster, just ready to come out, and you have to contain it? But if it did come out, it would turn you into that raging monster, that if it weren't kept under wraps, you would start breaking and destroying things. At least that's how you feel sometimes. You know, I want you to take out your colored piece of paper, which you should have gotten on your way in. And with a pen that you might have in front of you, if you don't have a pen, I think ushers will be able to help you out with that. Flip to the first flap. So you just open it up and flip to the first flap there. And I want to invite you to write down a word and a phrase or a sentence, what your anger is like. Can you describe what your anger is like? You know, while the Hulk can represent our feelings of anger, on another level, as Bruce Banner said in this film clip, he says, I'm always angry. Have you guys known people who are always angry? Maybe some of you feel that way. It's it's really like a condition of the soul or a disposition of our hearts, where there's this latent anger that's always deep down inside of us. We're always ready to react in anger because deep down inside we perceive the world and our situation through the lens and the eyes of anger. It's a certain mindset that people sometimes carry because they're just always angry deep down inside. And that might be something you're struggling with, or perhaps for some of us, we don't think that our anger is a struggle, but rather we see our anger as a strength, kind of like the Hulk, right? Because anger makes you feel like you're maybe in control, or anger makes you feel like you're powerful, like nothing can push you over or overcome you. You know, years ago when I used to work in social work, I attended this conference with a workshop full of men that were on this panel who were recovering abusers. They had beaten and hit their wives, and they had been in this program now for a while, and they were really recovering. And if you met these men, you wouldn't have thought that these guys were violent. They were just so soft-spoken and gentle appearing. But deep down inside, they had this anger inside of them as well, too. And in this exercise, they were given a drawing, a simple drawing of a human figure, and they were asked to circle the body parts that they most struggled with. And surprisingly, they circle their hands. And ironically, the hands are the offending body parts. A hand is what they use to hit with, and yet the hands also symbolized the ability to hold on to things. And what they wrestled with, they shared, was that they always felt powerless. Powerless to hang on to the things that were most important to them, to the things that mattered to them. And always felt like things were slipping through their hands, and so they would try to overcompensate by exerting more force. And that powerlessness, that sense of vulnerability, of loss, and of losing something, pushed them towards compensating for that insecurity with anger, getting angry. You see, sometimes anger may not be as much an expression of power, but a sign of deep weakness. You know what happens when the Hulk comes out of Bruce Banner? Here's the thing. So when that Hulk comes out, Hulk doesn't come out to bake a cake. He doesn't come out to go to the museum or sit down and build something with Legos and do something constructive. Hulk does one thing when he comes out. He smashes, he breaks things, right? He destroys. And sometimes for us, it seems like that anger, when it comes out of us, it may also have that kind of effect on the things around us, on our relationships, on people around us. But there is such a thing as a healthy anger. See, healthy anger can be a proper emotion with good reason that can be used and expressed in a good way. But most of us struggle with an unhealthy anger, right? We struggle with the anger that is more destructive, that is unchecked, that allows us or causes us to improperly express ourselves, and that seems almost out of control, or maybe even self-destructive, destructive to the things around us. Last Sunday, you heard Pastor Adam preach about how love can be your superpower. Today, we look at how anger can be your kryptonite and how we can remedy that. Moses has been one of my favorite characters in the Bible for years and years, just reading his story, identifying with him. But there was always one part of his story that I had a real difficult time digesting. I just couldn't accept it, And it was in Numbers chapter 20, verse 12. I invite you to turn with me there in your Bibles. Numbers chapter 20, verse 12. And while you're turning there, I'm going to ask for a little bit of help if someone can bring me a bottle of water, if that's all right. Thank you. Numbers 20, verse 12. I think all that Hulk screaming inspiration is making my throat real raspy. And it reads, verse 12, "And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them." God's telling Moses, you're not going to go into the promised land. And I thought, that can't be right? And I thought there's got to be a twist. So I would read through the end of the story, all the way through the end of Deuteronomy, and this is exactly how it ends. But how could this be? I mean, this Moses who led the Israelites out of captivity, out of Egypt, this Moses who parted the Red Sea, this Moses who led the Israelites for 40 years in the desert, and he doesn't get to go into the promised land. That's not the kind of ending you want to hear about for your hero. And yet that's exactly how it ends for him. And so the question that is begged is, what happened? How do we understand this incident, this story that we're in this morning, in order to understand the consequence that Moses had to receive? Well, we look into the story here in Numbers chapter 20, starting in verse 1. And it reads, "And the people of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month. And the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, would that we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness that we should die here, both we and our cattle? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them, and give drink to the congregation and their cattle." And Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock?" And Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their livestock. You see, there's something going on in this story where we see Moses losing his temper. Moses gets angry. He's upset. You can hear it in the story. You can hear it, and you see it when he strikes the rock twice. So how do we understand what happened with Moses? Why did he get so mad, so angry, that he would respond and react this way? Well, there are 4 factors that we can look at and consider from this story. And first is looking at the backstory of Moses. The question could be asked, which is, what kind of a person is Moses? What's Moses' personality? What's his character type? Could anger have been a part of his personality? Like for some of us, is anger part of your personality? Would you call yourself kind of the angry type? Where it doesn't take much to set you off. Maybe anger runs in your family. Your mom was angry, your grandma was angry, your great-grandma was angry. You're kind of an angry person. Perhaps for some of us, it's a character issue. I think that was the case for Moses. If we turn to Exodus chapter 2, keep your finger on Numbers 12 and turn to Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 to 12. We read this about Moses. "One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand." So Moses creates premeditated murder, right? Premeditated manslaughter. He looked this way and that. It wasn't like a sudden outburst of emotion when he killed the Egyptian. It was thought out. It was considered. It was calculated. He looked this way and that to make sure this coast was clear before he acted upon what he did, and then he tried to bury the evidence. It's like a perfect CSI kind of episode. So violence was not foreign to Moses. Acting out in rage and hurting somebody was not something that Moses did not know about by the time we get to the story in Numbers chapter 20. And how about that story about the Ten Commandments and the tablets upon which they were written. You all know, right, that the tablets that Moses shared that had the Ten Commandments with them, that the ones that he shared with the Israelites were not actually the original ones. They weren't the first ones, right? He actually ends up sharing basically copies of the Ten Commandments. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 32 to get a little bit more backstory of Moses and what he is like. Exodus chapter 32, verses 15 to 20. And it reads, "Then Moses turned and went down from the mountain with 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, tablets that were written on both sides, on the front and on the back they were written. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, 'There was a noise of war in the camp.'" See, what was going on here is they're coming back to the camp, they're hearing shouts, noise that sound like war, like battle, like fighting. But we know from this story that there was no battle going on. It was a party. That's how hard they were partying. It sounded like war was going on. And then it continues on in verse 18, "But he said, 'It is not the sound of shouting for victory or the sound of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing that I hear.' And as soon as he came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot. And he threw the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered it on the water and made the people of Israel drink it." Now, this is a pretty crazy incident. And the way Moses reacts here, pretty extreme. It says that he was burning hot with anger. And he takes the tablets. The tablets don't just fall out of his hand. He doesn't get so frustrated, he just puts his hands up and the tablets fall down. What does it say? It says that he throws the tablets. When we're angry, sometimes we look for the nearest thing to try to slam, to bang, to toss, to throw, and we're not really thinking too clearly about, should I throw this, should I throw that? We're not calculating and planning out, maybe I should throw that over there. Let me go over there and throw that. Or maybe it was over here, I could break this. No, I can't break that one. We don't give ourselves that time when we're burning hot with anger. And so when Moses is burning hot with anger, he grabs the things that are already in his hands and he throws those things. He throws them so hard that it falls to the foot of the mountain and they break and shatter. And then he goes down and he melts the golden calf down into just a molten pool of undefinable gold, which I would say was necessary for him to do. But then he goes further and he grounds the gold into powder, into like dust, gold dust. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool, But then he takes that dust and he's not done and he sprinkles it across the water. And I thought, that's kind of poetic, that sprinkling gold dust on water. But then he makes the people drink that water with the gold dust. And I thought, man, that's just crazy stuff, Moses. What is going on with you, dude? But he is mad. And then you get this in Exodus 34, verse 1, where it says, "The Lord said to Moses, 'Cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke.'" As if Moses didn't know that he broke them. When I read this, I know sometimes I read things with an Asian lens. Go figure, right? But I see a bit of Asianness in God here. Moses, the tablets you broke, right? It's like a little passive aggressiveness here, as if Moses didn't know that he broke them. It's like God kind of rubbing it in there. Moses, you're angry. You broke my tablets. And here you see that Moses, there's a bit of a profile on him, a bit of a history where it's not unusual. It's not foreign to him to act out in a bit of anger and rage where there's breaking, there's hurting, there's killing, there's hitting. Moses saw violence and aggression as a way in which he would respond to his anger. For some of us, we may be prone to anger. It might be a character issue for us. It might be a personality thing for us. How many of us in here would say, yeah, that's something I wrestle with, deep inside of me. Maybe some of us have slammed doors. We've shouted mean things at people, and maybe we have, used unkind hand gestures at people. Maybe retaliation and vengefulness is part of your inclination. Maybe you have fantasized and dreamt up ways of getting back at someone. You don't actually carry it out, you don't act it out, but in your world in here, you're getting back at them, Or maybe you're the silent and deadly type, the other silent, deadly type, You're the type that you smile. You look pleasant, but deep down inside, man, you have needles flying at the person's eyes. You're that silent type with that smile. That's usually sometimes the scariest, right? But then you also allow it to sit in you, that anger, and it festers, and then it turns into resentment and births bitterness. Is anger part of your personality profile?